Okay, so how are we doing? I was reflecting on my way over. This is my first time in a classroom since December of 2019, because many of you know I went on maternity leave in January of 2020. So when the fall semester of 2019 ended, I never ended up coming back to work. I was supposed to come back like the week that COVID shut everything down. So I've literally like not been in a classroom, basically on campus, since December of 2019. So this is fun to see everybody and be in person. We're going to try this today, and just solely based on numbers and seeing how many of you are here, and that Rachel, I think in general, you may like to be here. I think we'll plan to just have Tuesdays. We'll just try to do it in person from now on. Of course, we can shift and change if anything changes, but for now, let's just plan to try and do Tuesdays in person. Does that sound like a plan for now? Okay. So today, what I want to do, a few things. I want to introduce what I have been thinking through as sort of our first check-in. So if you'll recall, the bulk of like the points in this class are related to these multiple check-ins that lead us toward this end product of the community assessment. So I've kind of been thinking through what's our first check-in and what are some of the things we can get started on now that are going to help us move toward this sort of end goal. So I want to present those at some point and see if we can dialogue around who wants to sign up for what. Those of you who have a really strong, like, I definitely want to do this, hopefully we can make that happen. Those of you who are feeling a little bit more like, whatever, I'm happy to jump in on anything. Maybe you can pause for a moment and then let others who have a really strong desire to do one thing or another, and then we'll get everybody signed up. But today, I think what we'll do is I'm going to sort of introduce some of those things, and then we will talk about the papers. What I had intended to do was have some discussion groups in the class, and then anybody who logged in remotely have their own discussion group. But Rachel, that might not be a good idea since you're the only one. So we may have to play around with how do we engage Rachel in this virtual space a little bit more? How are we going to make sure that she can hear what we're talking about? So we'll play around with that. Before we jump in, any sort of things on your mind, current events, things that you want to bring up or mention or talk about before we delve in? One thing that I'll just mention is I saw, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that Fort Collins has officially deemed that the camping ban is unconstitutional. So that felt like sort of a win for folks experiencing homelessness. So they can't be legally, can't be like, what's the word, convicted or held accountable for being outdoors sleeping. So that was kind of a win, although that's sort of juxtaposed against the weather right now. And so I think that's just something else. Kat and I were talking this morning, just like, you know, the acknowledgement that it's been -7, right? And so just keeping in mind how things like the weather are impacting folks who are experiencing homelessness right now. What else? Other things on your mind that you want to bring up or chat about or anything before we get started? Or Rachel, anything on your end? No? Okay. Then I guess we can just kind of jump in. I had this reminder to me about the seating chart, but it looks like Aries is down. So I might need to take your all's picture. Don't mind all the tabs. I might need to just, if that's okay with you, if I can take a picture so that I can go back and enter the seating chart. I just knew if I didn't put this in here that I would not remember. Is that okay with people if I take a picture so I can put it in the seating chart? I promise I won't post that. Thank you. Okay. All right, so I had an icebreaker question. We were going to do this also in breakouts so that Rachel, anyone who was online could hear. Let's see. Let me try turning the computer around and see if Rachel can hear. And if not, I'll just respond. Rachel, so will you just let me know if you can hear classmates as we're going through this process?
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Okay. All right, so our icebreaker question for today is if you could immediately gain one skill, what would it be? Anybody have thoughts about that? To be able to what?
Parallel park.
Parallel park, okay. You probably couldn't hear that, Rachel, could you? No, okay, so Emma said to be able to parallel park. Anybody like pro parallel parkers? I feel like I'm pretty good. Yeah, okay, there's a few of them. Good. What else? What other immediate skills? Yeah, Kat. Okay. Like Olympic style skating. So Kat says figure skating because she's going skating this afternoon. Anybody pretty good at figure skating or ice skating? No. Okay, Jake, kind of 2 for 2 up here. Okay. Okay. Play hockey. What else? Other skills. Yeah. Okay. Jake wishes that he could work on his bike, fix his bike a little bit better on his own. Here we have in here that's a bike. Okay. Yeah, they're awesome over there. Okay, and one reference to the bike co-op. Rachel, have you been to the bike co-op? No, okay, so that could be a good resource. What else? Other skills that you would like to immediately gain? Yeah, yeah. Okay, here we go again. Okay, Juliana wishes she knew how to swim better. Okay, what else? Yeah. Okay. Morgan wishes that she could revamp her Spanish speaking skills. Okay. Anybody want to be able to, anybody feel like you guys let us know? Okay. There. What else? Skills that you could gain. Yeah, Abby. So there might be an office that's the same number as the classroom. So Addie said she wishes she were better at directions because she got a little bit lost coming to the classroom today. Okay, what else? Mastery in something, but calligraphy, okay. So Hannah wishes that she just had mastery in something, maybe calligraphy. So Ashley was similar to Morgan, just the ability to pick up another language. Rachel, you can feel free to chime in at any point also.
I just don't want to interrupt anyone because I don't know if anyone's talking, but I'll have to second the parallel parking because that is a skill that I'm really not good at.
Okay, another parallel parking person. Okay, yeah. Okay. Jake again. Kelly wishes that she was a natural runner. Okay. Any other natural runners in here? Do you consider yourself a natural runner or? Okay. Okay. But you have the commitment and the motivation. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so cooking, ideally something besides mac and cheese, more robust cooking. Javier, don't you enjoy cooking? Okay. Okay, nice. And particularly during COVID, right? You felt like this is something. Okay. What else? Let us go into immediately. Always be warm. Okay. Are you a person who runs cold? So the last few days have not been kind to you. Okay, so Lisa says she wishes she was always warm. She's not always warm. Okay. Yet? Any language. Okay. Yeah, another language. So Rachel, another language, Javier said. And I probably am in that similar boat. I think Morgan, like you, I at one point was like really close to feeling like I was fluent, like had one dream in Spanish, but then if you don't use it, you lose it, So. Okay, all right, I'm gonna bring you back. And we're gonna just have to figure out how to do this discussion. If anybody has ideas, let me know as we get closer to that part of class. Okay, so like I mentioned, what I wanna talk through first is our first kind of check-in assignment. So as I was kind of thinking through, brainstorming with Bree, what are some of the first things that we could do and take on that would help us feel like we're moving toward our end goal of having a community assessment completed, right? And there are some things that we can't do yet because we don't have access to the data yet, right? We haven't done any training yet on qualitative data and whatnot, but I think there are plenty of things we could work on now that could lead us toward that end goal. So the four things that I'm thinking about, one is, so I mentioned that CSU has some funds available for community engaged learning experiences. Can you all hear me okay? Is this volume okay? Okay. So the funds are readily available, but we still have to go through the process of filling out an application. And so I thought this might be a nice opportunity for those of you who are interested in, it's kind of like a mini grant. So if you have some interest in grant writing or you feel like that's a skill or whatnot, that might be a good option for you. I'll share the template and then we would work together on kind of filling out some of those sections of the application. So that's the first one. The second one is starting to kind of frame a background and a justification. So Taylor shared the Homeward Alliance website, and there's a lot of information on the website around current rates of people reading now so far to sort of frame all of the structural and systemic factors that go into homelessness. And so creating sort of our background and justification for this, and again, in a draft format, could be an area that would be helpful. The third one is coming up with a directory or sort of a who's who of all of the different partner organizations. So you might engage with Taylor or MJ or some of the other folks that we've already connected with to find out who else haven't we connected with yet, who does what, right? What are the strengths of these different organizations? How do they kind of work together? So kind of building this directory for us so that we get a better robust picture of who. And then the last one is essentially taking all of the notes and brainstorming that we started to do last week when we looked at community assessments generally, as well as some really specific examples of community assessments, and kind of organize those, ultimately coming up with a set of recommendations of the different sections that we should have in our community assessment. Okay, so the first thing I will say is all of these things will end up being kind of a rough draft, right? You'll bring whatever you work on, you'll bring to the rest of the class, present, here's what we're working on, here's where we're at, here's where there are holes and we need input or insights, right? So it will be a very collaborative process even outside of the small group, but you'll also be working in a small group on these things. So I kind of proposed potentially how many students in each of these areas that I think it might make sense. So I am happy to post it and let you kind of jump in and add where you're interested in. I'm happy to take a few minutes right now and talk through it. What do you all think works best? First off, what questions do you have so far about some of these things? Let me go one more slide and just show you kind of what I'm thinking about. So what I'm thinking, and again, let's just be clear that this is all flexible, right? But my first thought is, how about, so in 2 weeks, on Tuesday the 2nd, each of you will do sort of a check-in, present where you're at with the process to the class. Then on that Thursday of that week, so that is I have a leadership conference that I am attending anyway, and so we weren't planning to have live class that day anyway. So that might be a nice opportunity to work in your groups to kind of finalize it, and then submit your closer to final draft on Monday after that week. So that's just kind of a tentative plan. I think it'd be really nice to, take a couple weeks, work on it, bring it to class for any comments, thoughts, feedback, work on it a little bit more, and then submit where you're at with it. So let me go back then. So with that additional context, any questions so far? And do you all feel like you have ideas yet of what you'd like to do? Do you want to go through that process right now? I can pull up the spreadsheet and we can put folks in there, or what do we think? Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm interrupting anyone.
Nope.
I have a question about the third one with the partner organizations. Have we met people from all of the partner organizations, or are there potentially more? And will we be researching like who else could be involved as part of that?
Yeah, so we have not yet met everybody. And so, yes, you would also be looking into who else are some of the players. It probably would involve meeting with MJ and Taylor and getting their thoughts and perspectives on who else. So I have kind of a list that they've provided as kind of a starting point, and then it would probably be a little bit of follow-up as well. Is that helpful? Do you all want to see the application and see what that entails? I think I have that. All right, let's see here. Did I have that pulled up? Oh my gosh. How many of your brains work like mine and you have 1,000 tabs open at once? This is terrible. And then you can't see them once they're up there. All right, hold on. No, this isn't it. So let me pull this up so you can look at that for a second and see if this feels like something interesting. Maybe. I think I also have it saved. Goodness gracious. Okay, so here's the, Rachel, can you see the grant application? I just want to make sure I shared my full screen. Okay, so here's the application. So it gives sort of an overview of their service learning, not department, but their initiatives to support service learning, which we'll talk about today. But anyways, so here's some criteria. So this is a new project. It's also a new course, but what we would be using the funds for are more for the project than the course. So we certainly are eligible. So we need to demonstrate how our project meets the following criteria. Objectives, outcomes, and a timeline, community need, having a positive impact on the community. I always find it, so one of the things I try to commit to is when I see language in applications that doesn't feel reflective of what they're trying to do, is to provide some feedback. So the other thing I think would be really nice, so whoever is kind of taking this on, let's also note the places in the application where we might be able to provide some feedback on language, you know, some of this target population, right? Some of that is a little bit of outdated language. So that's just an aside. I think always as you're filling out applications or you come across things, you have an opportunity to provide some feedback to folks. So that's just a total aside, but something I think that would be helpful for those of you working on this. So we will apply for $1,000, but when I talked to the woman who coordinates this, she said they have plenty of funding available. So I think we could also apply for more than that if we wanted to. So it's technically due April 1st. So I think we're right in the timeline. And here are the components of the grant. So a title, the amount requested, a brief description, the narrative. So that's 3 pages maximum, describing what the project is, address the quality of the service provided, relevance to the course content, the budget. Some of that will, you know, again, some of this you can work together with me and bring into the class and we can talk through some of this. I also asked her when I emailed her whether the way that we're envisioning using the funds seems appropriate. And she said, yes, absolutely. That falls right into reasons that they provide these funds. Okay, so then we'll just sort of complete this. We'll bring it to Dr. Nelson, who'll have to sign on it and then submit the application. So you can see the form here. It just has those same sections listed in there. Then you will do a line item budget. And we can think about if there are some additional things that we want to include aside from only participant stipends. But that's, I think, our main item that we're thinking about using these funds for. Yes. Let's see. I mean, it seems like it would, right? If it says cash incentives, maybe if it's in the form of a gift card. I'll circle back and double check. But like I said, when I asked, she said a perfect approach for mutual reciprocity. And then you can see we have plenty of funds available. So please request enough to meet your needs. So I'll double check and just find out how, in what format can we pay this money out. But yes, good catch, Hannah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a good question around, oh, Rachel, you probably can't hear. I'll do my best, Rachel, to restate what people are saying, but that was talking about sort of ethically, there are certainly medical situations in which you don't want the incentive to be too high that you're coercing somebody into doing something. And I think that's always the case, is finding the balance of what feels like an appropriate amount for what we're asking of somebody, so that we aren't ever coercing somebody, even if it feels harmless to us, what we're asking for, that someone's never in a situation where they feel like they couldn't say no to this, even if they didn't want to, or they felt uncomfortable or whatnot. Okay, other questions or things you're thinking about so far? Let me go back to some of the list of ideas and things. How many of you are feeling like you know for sure what you want to do? Okay, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of you. Okay. How many of you are feeling like there's a couple options that I could jump in on and feel good about? Okay. Okay. So why don't we, what do you think? How do you want to do this? Do you want me to just post the link and you can go in there? Do you want to just sign up for stuff now? Do you need a little time? What feels good for people? Okay, we have a vote for doing it now. What do others think? Are people all ready to sign up for it? Or are you good with sort of a, here's what's left if you're not sure yet? Okay, okay. The other thing that I was just gonna do is see about, and Bree, this might be something that I could use your help with, is also creating groups on Canvas so that you have your working groups in there and you can connect with one another that way. I don't know if you all have experience working with groups in Canvas. Does it feel helpful, or does it feel, have you had success with that? Or do you feel like just texting and having a Google Doc that you're working off of works? And maybe you all can just kind of decide in your small groups how you want to engage, but we'll set up the groups on Canvas just in case. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Okay, okay. Hannah mentioned, Rachel, just that if we're going to use Slack, that we could just set up channels in Slack to do it that way. Okay. All right, so let's go back to, is this the sign up? Yeah. Okay, so some of you felt like you for sure know. What are you thinking? Those of you who are like, yeah, I definitely want to do this. There are a couple of you that raise your hands. Yeah, I think that's perfect. You know, the other thing that those of you that have met with our small little office hours, you know, we've talked a little bit about how do you take your strengths, right? The things that showed up for you, and apply those to the kinds of things that the kinds of options, right? And so thinking from that lens, sort of the strengths-based approach, and also knowing where you have some learning to still do. So that to me feels like a perfect way to plug in, Emma, right? To say, I want to learn a little bit more about community assessments, get a better idea of what that all entails. So that feels like a good start. What else? Those of you who feel like, I think there were 3 or 4 of you. Addie, did you have the who's who? Is that this one, the third one? Okay. And then Juliana, I know you also. Okay. There was a hand or 2 over here. Lisa, did you have an initial? Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, I see a chat. Okay, Shannon, let me. Why can't I get, there we go. Oh my goodness. Partners involved or background investigation. Okay. So Shannon. Okay, others had strong thoughts. Rachel said this one, or she's happy to also do the background justification if there was somebody else who really wanted that one. Anybody interested in working on the grant application? Okay, I can't. Okay. And we don't have to have all three, right? If others of you are more interested down here, you know, we don't have to fill all three of the spots on each of them. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So then that will put, is that feeling okay for others of you? Yeah, okay. So Ashley, Nick, Kelly. Let's see. Oh, there you are. Scanning the room, Hannah. Does that feel, oh wait, no, you already. Okay, are you good with that one? Does that feel okay? Okay. Awesome. So I'm happy if we need to, or if we want to reserve a little bit of time, let's say on Thursday, and while we're remote, I can break you out into your rooms just to do some initial, like, hey, when do you want to meet? Let's exchange contact info and do some of those connecting pieces on Thursday, just kind of as a starting point, if that'd be helpful. Okay. All right. Let's see. Sign up sheets. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So Hannah's question, Rachel, is whether there's some like chronology to these, like whether the background and justification could inform the grant application. I think that the grant application is like surface level enough that you probably together could create a short justification without needing kind of a more fleshed out version. That's at least my first thought, but maybe as you two connect and are looking a little bit more closely, let us know if you feel like you'd rather wait and take some of what, you know, what that group has done. Maybe you start with the budget justification, you know, some of the other parts first, and we could pull and fill it in. So I think that's a good question, Hannah, and we could think about how to do that. And then some of you, like the who's who, you may need to be connected to MJ or to Taylor. So we'll just make sure you kind of let me know what you need, right? I can meet with each group individually, and we'll make sure that everybody feels like you have what you need to be successful. Okay. All right. So what I wanted to do for the rest of the class today is kind of talk through some of the readings. And you know, it was very intentional on my part to have you read criticisms of service learning, right? Because part of what we're trying to do together in this class is to be really intentional about how we engage in this process. And one of the best ways to do that is to reflect on all of the ways that we could potentially do harm, right? So that we can be even more intentional and try to identify what some of our potential blind spots, or as I was recently learned to reframe blind spots to blank spots, or another term that, because blind spots can be viewed as ableist language. So anyways, thinking about our blank spots, one of the best ways to identify that is to learn about what are some of the common pitfalls and what are some of the ways that traditional service learning can do harm. And so, you know, as we talk about trying to be humble in our approach, trying to be self-reflective in our approach, that is really important to me and to all of us, is to think about what are the potential downfalls and how do we do our best to minimize the harm that we could potentially do. So I hope that as you read those, you were kind of thinking about our project and what some of those potential pitfalls or missteps or ways that we could reinforce stereotypes or do harm? What are some of those, so that, again, so that we can do our best to minimize that? So I have some guiding questions, but I'm thinking about how do we dialogue about this with Rachel? She can't hear us. And do you want to just talk about this as a large group? My intention was to do some smaller breakouts. But what do you all think? Do you want to do some, like, divide the class up and talk in small groups and then come back together and talk as a larger group? Is it going to be too loud if you're staying distanced? Or do you feel like that will work?
If you did smaller groups, would there be a way to move the computer closer to like one of the groups at the front?
That's exactly what I was thinking, Rachel, is maybe I'll just put the computer and we'll see if you can hear if you're like in one of the smaller groups. Will that work? So I had just a couple of sort of guiding questions. What are some of the possible pitfalls with our project? And potential ways that we could do harm if we're not intentional, or even if we are intentional, right? How does power and privilege show up and impact this process, this project? And then what are some of the really tangible ways that we could try to minimize harm in the way that we're doing this? So those are the things that I want to kind of start off with. The other thing that I pulled from one of the readings were these principles of good practice. And so after we talk about some of those, if we have some time, I think it would be nice to look at this list of some of these principles of good practice and see how are we doing our best to attend to some of these principles. Any questions before we dive in and do some smaller discussions? Okay. So let me think about this. So let's just kind of divide up the room. Group, if that's okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I'm realizing that when I unplug the computer, you're not going to have these questions. Do you want me to write them on the board? Or can you remember them? So yeah, does somebody have them pulled up in there on your slides online? You could just reference them for the group. So potential pitfalls, ways we could be doing harm, power and privilege, and then how we could minimize it. Okay. Rachel, I'm going to bring you over, see if this works, okay? Let's see. Maybe I'll set her here. What can you see, Rachel? Can you see anybody?
No, I think I can see the tops of people's heads. Okay, now I can see people.
Hello, Rachel.
Let's see. So, let's see. Can you hear Kat? Could you hear anybody? No. Okay, let's see. It's probably not good practice to like my computer around because of all the.
Oh yeah, that's fine. I don't mind. Like I can.
Okay. All right, we're gonna try one other location. And
Look at me. That's fine. Rachel, can you hear me?
I can kind of hear you. I think I'll be able to hear you.
Cool.
Will you send me your phone number. Oh, wait, I have it. I'm gonna call you on the phone and try speakerphone. I think that might work a little better.
Okay.
I'm gonna